Welcome back into the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we have our very own congressional Capitol Hill reporter here with us to tell us all about everything Ted Cruz is up to. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing, joined as always by Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing, and our Hill reporter himself, Drew Lerner, is back. We're going to break down the special committee hearing, the Senate committee hearing that Drew attended last week as part of a State of Sports streaming conversation. We also have a testy ESPN reunion and our hot mics as always. But first, Michael Jordon. Did not think that was going to be anything I was talking about in the year 2025. I thought he was going to play golf, make millions of dollars from Nike, and we would not be hearing about him again. But he is joining the NBA on NBC broadcast team, guys. He recorded a message that played at the NBC upfronts this week announcing his arrival and some of the other details of their NBA coverage and what they're up to on Peacock and more. It seems like the specifics of the role are relatively unclear. History with the network, of course, and some executives that he still had relationships with seem to be what got this thing over the finish line. And obviously he no longer owns the Charlotte Hornets. So I would say now he's allowed to join a broadcast team, but Tom Brady has proven you can do whatever the hell you want. Ben, how much are we going to see Michael Jordan's face this fall / the next 11 years on NBC?
I don't think a lot, because I think if it was a lot, like NBC would be shouting it from the rooftops, and all we have right now is a title of special contributor, which is like just a step above intern. So I don't have particularly high expectations for getting Michael Jordan on like a weekly or even bi-weekly basis. But when he's on, it's going to be a big deal. Like whatever he's doing, whether it's analysis in the studio, whether it's pre-produced packages, like whatever he's doing, because I think the thing about Michael Jordan, like people don't realize, is for somebody who is at one point the most famous person on earth, like he's pretty much kept a low profile since retiring 22 years ago after his playing career. Like this is not somebody who has been in the public spotlight. This is not somebody who's done any media work. This is somebody who's only been interviewed probably a handful of times relative to his fame since retiring. And so whatever he does from NBC, like it's going to have flashing bright lights and going to be a really big deal.
Drew, this feels a little bit closer. Now, again, we don't know how extensive it'll actually be, but Ben and I did a roundup of the NBA hires in the broadcasting space last week when Amazon announced like its full team. And I said, these NBC announced the people we know are going to be there don't feel very Football Night in America-ish, right? Like the pomp and circumstance doesn't seem to be there when you think of Bob Costas and, you know, even like a Tony Dungy, who's at least like a father figure of the sport, not exactly as famous as Michael Jordan. But this one feels a lot closer to the type of big stuff that they've been telling us they were going to do. So I like it from that standpoint, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they're playing into the nostalgia of it all, and I know that's been, talked about exhaustively now, but to me, I think back to The Last Dance and kind of one of the first looks, at least, our generation, Brendon, who didn't grow up watching Michael Jordan, kind of one of the first looks we got of him, speaking candidly. I know that was like a self-produced, project. So a lot of it, he kind of got final cut on that, but that's what makes this role with NBC so interesting to me. Are we going to hear Michael Jordan opining on today's players, or are we just going to see him in some pre-produced packages, maybe giving some softball interviews to some current players? I mean, either way, I'll be honest, it's going to be interesting, whatever he's doing with NBC. Yeah. But I mean, just, for the mere fact that it's Michael Jordan talking about modern day basketball. But if this is just a few one-off packages that, come on during, the Eastern Conference Finals or whatever, I think this is like something that NBC did to win the upfronts. I'm not really sure this is going to be all that relevant to their overall
they can
coverage.
always put out, like in October when they're announcing their schedule and whatever else, they can say NBA on NBC headlined by Michael Jordan and all-star team. We all can see how that's going to play out. But I would say the most likely outcome is it's probably a lot more of that. Maybe when they, after football season, transport over to the Sunday night, premiere package that they're going to try to put together, Basketball Night in America. I don't know if that's what they'll actually call it, but that's what they've kind of been promoting it as. Maybe he zooms in on a big screen and Maria Taylor asks him 3 questions and they keep it moving. But the Dan Patrick show I listened to this morning, he basically said he could see players chomping at the bit to basically get to talk to him, and almost flip it where, I don't know, Tyrese Halliburton gets to ask Michael Jordan questions. Like, that's almost the selling point, more so than MJ interviewing anybody, because, again, we don't even know if he'd be good at doing an interview. I mean, the Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes thing was, oh, wow, they're in the same room together, but it wasn't exactly compelling content because Tom Brady's not, Frost Nixon out there. Like, it's just not what the deal is. So I don't know what this will look like, but Ben, I mean, this is closer to what we were talking about last week in terms of the flash we were expecting from NBC, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely is the headline to come out of all of these NBA hirings we were just talking about before we started recording, just about like this flood of NBA talent now that's all – everybody's picking their teams now. You have Vince Carter now off the board, obviously Reggie Miller, but Michael Jordan's like one of one. This is the biggest name to happen in this cycle, regardless of how big or more likely how small this role is. But yeah, I mean, I think the worst thing they can do to me is make this about Michael Jordan. Like, I think we've all kind of hinted at, like, we want to hear Michael Jordan talk about today's game. The worst thing that could happen is if this is Michael Jordan getting interviewed about Michael Jordan, and it just feels like a package that could be on NBA TV, reflecting on the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals just as much as today's game. Like, we want to see something about today's game, hear Michael Jordan weigh in, because other than his tenure as the Charlotte Bobcats owner, like, we really don't have like any indication about what Michael Jordan even thinks about the NBA in 2020.
That's what I was going to say, is like, in the back of my head, I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm not sure how much he keeps up with basketball these days. And then I remember he was an active NBA owner until like 2 years ago. So I would hope
active might be strong.
Yeah, active might be strong, and, mileage may vary on how good of an owner he necessarily was. Like, as the Hornets are once again in the lottery, as we're watching last night. Not that that's his fault, but kind of still is. So, yeah, I think, it will draw attention whenever and whatever he does. They have the All-Star game. They have conference finals games. There will be opportunities, and I would imagine it's more of those premier moments rather than a weekly recurring, what MJ thinks about the pick and roll that, that 19th best team in the league is running. Ben, I want to circle back on a segment here that we have not come to in a minute, that you and I were trying to remember what we renamed it. Did it come to you? It's the Kyle Hamilton of the week until we can recall that or find some sort of transcript to prove us otherwise. But is that what we're sticking with?
It's Kyle Hamilton for now.
Okay. So this is it could be any big man in the NBA, but it is this playoffs. Mitchell Robinson of the New York Knicks or Steven Adams should shoot free throws like Rick Barry. The underhand granny free throws. Anytime somebody gets hacked or struggles at the free throw line in any sort of way, I literally saw the New York Post called up Rick Barry and had him talk about why Mitchell Robinson should shoot free throws the way that he does. We cannot
Rick Barry
do
was excited about that.
I bet he was. He likes to talk for sure, but probably not super hard to get a hold of him. But I just love that for 60 years now, this is the best we can do. Big man struggles to shoot free throws, shoot it granny style, underhand, content for a week.
Well, it was always this was a Giannis conversation at one point, I know, and I think it was a Shaq conversation at one point too. The difference there though is like those guys are two of the best players in the league at their respective times, Shaq and Giannis. So it's like if anybody could get away with shooting granny style, it's those two. If it's Steven Adams or Mitchell Robinson doing it, that's going to be what they're known for the rest of their careers.
To be fair, I did watch Mitchell Robinson airball a free throw and then like fall to the ground clutching his face in complete embarrassment. So I get it. But I just wish maybe we could just do a little better. I don't know. Maybe analyze his minutes or talk about a different sort of lineup thing, but no, just call up Rick Barry. I also have something else we need to establish here, and I'll bring Drew in. We're going to name a new segment, okay? Because I've had this one bookmarked for a while. It's just the overblown story of the week, something that absolutely did not matter as much as the sports media conversation would have you think that it did. And I have two candidates. I have blowing white smoke, which is the entirety of the news cycle around Pope Leo being a Cubs fan and White Sox fan, or being at the World Series once upon a time, and Villanova grad, et cetera, or just torpedo bat of the week.
I think torpedo bat probably has a little bit more staying power.
That gets my vote. I think that embodies exactly what you're going for.
Yeah.
Okay. I was personally over the Pope Leo conversation after tweet number like 38. So maybe that's just me, but
you lasted longer than I did.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not just me. But I don't want everything to be of the week. So maybe we can workshop it. Maybe we just call it like torpedo batting as a segment. I don't know. Okay. So we'll have to, do we have a nominee for this week, Ben? Is there anything?
The torpedo bat of the week would be the Pope Francis
okay, yeah, I guess
the Pope discussion,
in this case, he's not the name, but he gets to have the inaugural title of the week. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking of the torpedo bat stuff because I opened my Yahoo Fantasy Baseball app today, and Anthony Volpe still has a little icon from when that whole saga was playing out, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that quite. He didn't become the fantasy MVP that people quite told me he was going to after the first week when he was, the poster child of that news story.
I mean, there's a chance Jordon Hudson becomes a torpedo bat, right? Like it's.
Well, we have a different one for her that I haven't told you about. This is the Jordon Hudson line.
Okay.
It's the touchy. Where do we come in on the? Yeah. Can we talk about this types of stories? We haven't come up with a new one, so I haven't thrown this one at you either. But if we're just emptying the holster on the segments that may or may not come up again, that one I already had pinpointed. If there's kind of like a personal life thing, are we sure? How does it really overlap with sports? Are we allowed to talk about it? That's the Jordon Hudson line.
Yeah. That definitely fits to a T there.
Okay. All right, so we're making our way. We're getting them named one by one here. Well, they'll all pop back up before long. Up next, though, Rich Eisen rejoins ESPN in the same time slot as Pat McAfee, much to McAfee's chagrin, I guess. There's a few layers to this we can get through before we get into our state of sports streaming conversation here. But so Eisen was obviously an original ESPN. That was how he started, alongside Stuart Scott and a few different roles. And then was one of the pioneering guys to kind of do the thing we're seeing everybody do now of splitting up the rights to his show and working in a few different places. He's obviously been the face of NFL Network for the entirety of that network's history, and still is. He's not coming back to ESPN to host the draft and take Mike Greenberg's job. He's just bringing his radio show to ESPN. And so it's another thing that they're basically adding to the service that we're about to get into, where it'll be some content in the mix when you open up the ESPN app. Just starting there, Drew, what did you think of seeing the deal and them adding another marquee personality to the mix?
Well, yeah, it makes sense. It kind of bolsters, their launch of the new direct-to-consumer app. But I think what the point that we all want to get at to probably here is this is an emergency lever. It feels like for ESPN, right? This is the break glass if Pat McAfee becomes too controversial for us, or even if Pat McAfee becomes so fed up with us as a network that he bolts for Netflix or whoever would want to license his show next. It's a pretty safe option, right? We heard that ESPN was courting Colin Cowherd, who is also in the same time slot as Pat McAfee and has been for quite some time. Apparently, Cowherd obviously re-signed with Fox. Eisen seems like the next best thing. The thing is with me, he doesn't really scratch that same itch for ESPN, right? I don't think Rich Eisen is really someone who is getting young people to tune in droves. I'm not even sure he's the type of person that would get someone over the line to subscribe to a direct-to-consumer service, especially considering his show's been on Roku for at least a couple years now, which is free. So I can't imagine that would go over too well with his fans that want to watch live. And I know we talked, Brendon, before the show about how the podcast comes out, on all the platforms afterwards anyway. But it's content, right? And at the end of the day, ESPN is going more towards, licensing these brands, these people that already have established audiences. And Eisen obviously is a huge success. He has a huge audience, a loyal audience. They follow him to all these different platforms. So for my money, I think it's a good acquisition for ESPN.
I mean, they've basically started acting like a streaming network, a streaming service, right? I mean, Netflix has a John Mulaney show and a boxing match and this and that. And if you're just spending time on the platform, you have stuff to click. I think that's really what they're eventually going to go for now. I know Netflix is a bad comparison. They're never going to get up to the volume, and they don't need to necessarily. But yeah, it's going to be interesting how their strategy evolves when it comes to that stuff of what really matters to people who are buying. My theory is it's really just live sports, and I don't even think people care if there's anything else. But we'll see. But yeah, the McAfee part of it is interesting because it's the same exact time slot, and it is a hedge. I was a little bit, you can never really tell with McAfee how serious he's being. Sometimes I'm not sure if he quite knows how serious he's being. He's kind of just messing around, but also sending a message and just letting the, chips fall where they may after that. But I just really hope McAfee's not taken off guard or surprised by the idea that ESPN would want to protect themselves if he leaves, even if just to have another show in the mix, because he threatens or talks about other opportunities constantly. I mean, his show is already, he mentioned the phrase counter programming in his rant, Ben, that you wrote about on Awful Announcing, and he counter programs himself on YouTube.
Right.
So it's just like, what are we talking about? I hope he's not serious.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that his tone when he was talking about all the Rich Eisen stuff, which he loves Rich Eisen, like those two get along. They do segments on each other's shows when they are not both on the air at the exact same time, like they will be on ESPN. He likes Rich Eisen.
And McAfee does the paid weekly hit on the NFL Network pregame show with Eisen, so they have that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these guys are genuinely friends. He implied or insinuated that he played a role in, it sounded like, helping recruit Rich Eisen back to ESPN. It does sound like he was maybe caught off guard that they were keeping Rich Eisen at 12-3. And so his tone during the whole thing kind of vacillated between humorous, sarcastic, but also passive aggressive. Like there was definitely some passive aggressiveness in what he was saying. Trying to pull up the quotes now. He said, he's going live noon to 3 Eastern. And one of his producers said, that's a good time slot. And McAfee said, yeah, that was very interesting. And then later he said, should I read that as a message? And then he said, we have responses as well. That was the big one, was we have responses as well. So he also posted a cryptic tweet on Sunday night, which was like 12 hours before it came out that Rich Eisen was coming back to ESPN. And like I said in my story, I think it's maybe too early to connect the dots there. But I mean, he flatly said he's up to something, and he certainly seemed to be reflecting on the choices he's made throughout his career. So I'm sure there's another shoe to drop there as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because like the whole thing with getting McAfee was that you're licensing his content. And I think that's like good in theory and good in practice, but you need to be good partners with each other. And I expect ESPN's relationship with Rich Eisen to be what they had in mind when they created this relationship with Pat McAfee. I don't think you're going to get this sniping and back and forth like you've gotten with Pat through the last 2 years. I think that the Rich one is going to be much more what they had in mind with this kind of setup.
Well, and much more what they had in mind if the goal is to get people to care about the content enough to go subscribe, as we're about to get into. Like McAfee, the deal always, even if they tell us it works and they have data to back up that they have younger people engaging and they built up the TikTok channel and all that sort of stuff, it's like, well, great, I believe you, but it's like the type of engagement that like what's the sports betting guy who would always he would always tweet about like, oh, that Nike ad got 7,000.
Darren Rovell?
Yes, Darren Rovell. It's like the type of engagement that he would care about, right? Like not actual hard. This many people are directly tuned into or watching ads on ESPN platforms versus what we used to, it's not like that. So whereas from all we know, Rich Eisen's show is going to be behind a paywall. The video version at least is going to be entirely hidden away and you have to pay to get it. And that's much more of a business model that it kind of feels like has to be at least part of ESPN's approach to this new world.
I actually think if ESPN's smart, they will put shows like this, not necessarily Eisen's show, but they will put shows like this in front of the paywall as an entry point to get people just onto the platform, right? Because if you think of the biggest streaming services, like if you just think of YouTube, right? Like you're just there, you're clicking around. If ESPN wants to be essentially the YouTube for sports, you put a bunch of stuff like this that can get people top of funnel. And then you have the suggestions like, all right, well, look, behind the paywall, you get your 30 for 30 content or whatever, Omaha Productions stuff might be coming out. You can also, of course, get a bunch of sports that you're not going to be able to get without the subscription. If Eisen is going to have his, podcasts, radio show available for free elsewhere, it doesn't really make sense to put it behind the paywall for ESPN. I think they just want to be a destination with this app.
So maybe behind the paywall is not quite the right way to put it, but exclusive to ESPN platforms.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas McAfee is not even that, So
exactly.
It's going to be interesting if they make more Eisen-like acquisitions, because I do think they probably need to in this new world of licensing and everything else. We thought they might do it with the Stephen A. Smith show, once upon a time before his new deal got hammered out, and this one is much closer to that. All right, let's get into it. The state of sports streaming. Drew, you just mentioned ESPN becoming the YouTube of sports. I think YouTube is the YouTube of sports, so we can probably start there. As part of the findings that you were able to glean at the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, they conducted a hearing on sports streaming last week. Not exclusively related to YouTube, but I think the YouTube NFL deal for the Week 1 game in Sao Paulo this fall just directly illustrates the point that this Ted Cruz-led committee is trying to get to. So talk us through what was the primary point of that hearing and kind of what do you think they're trying to accomplish taking this issue on?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two parts. I'll start with, kind of what the point of the hearing was, and then I'll try to get at why the NFL decided to put this game on YouTube. I think, Ted Cruz was surprisingly candid in why this hearing happened. he kind of laid out there's two reasons why Congress generally schedules a hearing. One is just, informational, right? They want to get expert witnesses into Congress to kind of better understand why, in this case, certain sports leagues are selling their media rights as they are. And they just want to gather as much information so they can make a more informed policy choice if they ever draft up some legislation on this. That was the pretense of this hearing. Other times, they'll have hearings. You might recall, when they had some college presidents on the Hill like last year, pretty much to just grill them about decisions they had made. It's not really to gain any information or knowledge. But this one seemed to actually, at least for some of the senators there, be informational. The ones that weren't grandstanding about PBS and NPR, or if you're Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, railing against the NBA's business in China, both of which were not very relevant to the subject matter.
Playing the hits.
Yeah, exactly. And at the heart of it was the antitrust exemptions that are given to North American professional sports leagues when they're selling their media rights. Essentially, if you're unfamiliar, if you're the NFL or the NBA, you're allowed to pool together every team's rights and sell them as a national package. That's how every single major sports league has done it. Obviously, it applies to the NFL more so than NBA, MLB, who only carve out some of their rights for national games and then leave the rest to be distributed by the teams themselves. The NFL, of course, doesn't have local rights. All of their rights are sold nationally. So it is very pertinent to them, this antitrust exemption. And it's pretty interesting that the only league that was not there at the hearing was, in fact, the NFL.
Well, that's like, is it fair to say that's why the federal government might have interest in this? Because what's at issue is pre-existing federal legislation. Like, it's something where at least they kind of feel like, oh, this is our thing. Like, this is our deal to manage going forward.
That's exactly right. And the crux of the issue here is that the act, which was written in 1961 that granted these antitrust exemptions, only applies to television broadcasts. So there's a huge concern over, does this actually apply to streaming, which is obviously kind of where things are headed and where these sports leagues are headed. The NBA just did a huge deal with Amazon. And of course, as we just mentioned, the NFL just announced an exclusive game is going to be on YouTube this year, the Friday NFL Brazil game. And that kind of brings me to why the NFL would decide to do that. As part of this legislation, if you've read Awful Announcing, you probably know this already. The NFL is actually restricted as to when they can broadcast games on Fridays and Saturdays throughout the fall. So they are essentially, the window, I believe, is from the second weekend of September through the second weekend of December. Within that window, the NFL is not allowed to broadcast games on television if it's a Friday or a Saturday.
Which is to protect high school and college football and
precisely
keep those traditions alive for people, either on TV or, I guess, with high school, more likely just going, I guess, would kind of have been the idea once upon a time.
Right, exactly. And by putting their Friday game in Brazil on a streaming service, especially on a service like YouTube that you can access for free, the NFL, who has obviously been keen on kind of adding these dates, picking off dates in the calendar that they can put exclusive windows, and kind of encroaching on the college and high school games by scheduling a lot more games on Fridays and Saturdays in the last few years than they have previously. By putting it on a free streaming service, I think their logic here is to, hopefully avoid some of the scrutiny that would come if it was, say, behind a paywall on a streaming service, because, normally they're not allowed to schedule these games on the days that they would like to anyway. There's an exception this year, just how the calendar shakes out. The NFL Brazil game is actually prior to the window. But in future years, like next year, for instance, if the NFL wanted to do this game, it would fall within that restricted window. So I think this is kind of the start of, making sure that they have all their ducks in a row and hopefully having the best chance possible to allow themselves to schedule these games.
I think that is absolutely why they would be interested. I also feel like this is a pretty revolutionary moment in sports broadcasting in general. I wonder, because the fact that it's free on YouTube, I think is pretty huge, because it's combining the, all the things that these leagues want, putting a game on a digital platform, the data that they can get, the access to more people and especially younger people.
And crucially, this is also what the federal government wants. They want these games to be accessible and free or at very low cost to consumers, right? Because when you're granting an antitrust exemption, it is incumbent upon the businesses involved. In this case, this is the leagues, to make sure that they are, the antitrust exemption was for good reason, right? If they start using their powers to, kind of, raise prices for consumers, make stuff less accessible, that becomes an issue. And that's why the federal government would want to get involved.
I believe there's a Latin term for, spirit of the law that gets thrown around, but it's like that type of thing, right? It's like operating in good faith. And so, yeah, that makes sense. But it's different than a lot of the other ones that we've seen because it's free. It's not you don't have to be NFL, Sunday ticket subscriber. You don't have to even, be like a YouTube live TV, that product. You don't have to subscribe to that. It is youtube.com homepage, NFL game. That's what's going to happen. And it's just different than anything we've ever seen. And I think it's going to open up the floodgates. So like the YouTube chief business officer gave a quote to CNBC and probably others today. She said, people spend over 350 million hours watching official NFL content on YouTube. So it's fitting and thrilling to continue building that relationship. Streaming the Friday night game to fans for free around the world will mark YouTube's first time as a live NFL broadcaster, and we'll do it in a way that only YouTube can, with an interactive viewing experience and creators right at the center of the experience. If I were a PR person, I would have said no experience twice, but that's fine. I wonder if it's going to be free forever. Like, that's kind of the place that I start with this. Like, I don't want to get too ahead of my skis and be like, this is changing the whole world. And then next year you got to click in and then it makes you pay, like how they have movies on YouTube in theory, right? But you have to pay $5 and it's like, renting it on iTunes or whatever. I wonder if this is just a little appetizer for everybody and then things will change, or if this really would be their strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, for the NFL, they're really not sacrificing much. Actually, they're kind of having their cake and eating it too, because they're still getting a huge rights payout from Google/YouTube here. I think Peacock paid over $100 million for their NFL Brazil game last year. I'm sure Google paid 9 figures to the NFL this year. But I'm sure part of that deal was the stipulation that this would have to be broadcast for free. So maybe in the future, who knows what the regulatory environment is looking like for the NFL. Maybe they become a little bit more bold and brazen in their business practices and allow a YouTube to start charging for a game like this. But I think the whole point of this specific deal is that it is free.
What do you think of all this, Ben?
You said it's a transformative time for like the way we view sports, and obviously it is. I think it's such a transformative time just for the NFL in general. Like, it just feels like it from a TV viewing standpoint. Like, it's funny, we spend so much time talking and reporting on and analyzing these TV deals, and then just on a whim they decide, like, you know what, we're actually going to have a Friday game now during week 1 too. Or we're going to have an international, like, they're just finding new ways.
And by the way, it's in Brazil, a place we never even would have thought they could play until 2 years ago too.
Right. Like, they're just finding new ways to carve out new TV packages, to eventize every event, not only during the regular season and playoffs, but throughout the offseason. Like, we're going to get to the point where there are TV rights for the owners meetings, like down in Palm Beach. Like, it's getting crazy the way they're finding new ways to sell this.
Yeah, the NFL chief media officer in the Wall Street Journal today said the combine hasn't quite hit its ceiling as a TV event, and I was like, God,
yeah,
if that's true, I'm gonna tap out pretty soon here.
Oh yeah. Like, I think we're heading toward the draft being a full 7 days, like 1 day for each round. Like, they are just finding new, like, we are at the very start of whatever the NFL is doing now moving forward. And obviously streaming is a big part of all of this, but I know I've brought this up before, but my first NFL season at Awful Announcing culminated with that. Well, didn't culminate, but included that Peacock exclusive playoff game between the Chiefs and Dolphins where everybody froze their fingers off. And like, the outrage over that game and people having to buy a Peacock subscription 18 months ago compared to where we are now is just like insane. But yeah, I mean, the idea of it going to YouTube and going to Google and it being free is definitely interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see if it will stay that way. I was just thinking as you were talking about it, like, obviously it will be on the front page. Like, it will not be hard to find when you get to YouTube, but like, have you ever searched for a movie trailer and you're not quite sure if a movie trailer even exists yet? And people have pieced together like, oh, the Batman 2 trailer using old footage. I like the idea of people looking for an NFL game and like, you have to go through all these like fake NFL games that have been uploaded to YouTube first. That's where my mind went with that.
I have that with movie soundtracks on Spotify.
Yeah.
It's like a mess. There's like 70 playlists that fans have made that are like songs that remind me of, Sinners or whatever. It's like, okay, well, that's not what I'm looking for. I would like to just listen to the score. But yeah, I mean, we should also say, like, YouTube's uniquely equipped to make it free because they have the ad infrastructure to feel comfortable that they'll monetize it. Probably not break even or make money, but far closer to that than most of these platforms can do. But if the NFL is in like this bachelor phase, I feel like, where they basically have a relationship with every traditional and streaming platform that they possibly could. And when you look overseas, that's even more true probably. And they're everywhere that they could possibly want to be. And we're already in the arms race for 4 years from now when everybody assumes that they will opt out of their current deal. And Roger Goodell has said, like, we are a kingmaker. I mean, he didn't say it that way, but he told Pat McAfee like 18 months ago, talking about the Peacock game, he's like, we know we can build a platform for these partners we already have. And they have a vested interest in NBC's health. I think the league knows that these traditional networks need the NFL and they're going to kind of be good partners on their end. But also, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And they're finding that out sooner than later rather than waiting until 2029 and making like a really risky bet that, okay, Peacock's where we're going. We're just going to hope Peacock works. It's like, well, no, we have all these years of these exclusive games on ESPN Plus or on Peacock or, now on Prime and Amazon and Netflix where we can see if it works and then probably solidify and consolidate over time. Am I the only one who has an interest in the creators being in the comment from the YouTube exec? Is this how much do you guys buy that this is, as YouTube especially gets more involved, going to be a part of the way that some portion of fans are consuming football? Does this seem soon? Does this seem off in the distance? Does this seem like it's just going to annoy everybody? What's the vibe check on this?
I'd imagine you're the most qualified to speak on that, Brendon.
That's why I'm bouncing it off you, because I'm up in the clouds, just assuming that this is the future, and we're just we're all going to be watching the NBA on Twitch in 2 years or whatever. But what do you guys think?
I won't be. But
yeah,
but like
okay.
you might be, and people your age might be, but I think I'm aged like out of that demographic, or at least there hasn't been. Although I guess like the Pat McAfee watch-alongs, like I consumed some of the college football playoff watching those, and those aren't totally dissimilar, right? So like I think there's definitely something to that. I just For me, it's like I'm just an old guy who's going to be watching the games though. Usually I don't, that's kind of bells and whistles for me.
Yeah, there's clearly an audience for it. I think it's only growing. And I think your piece on iShowSpeed really highlighted that, like, this is not something that's going away. And it's really something that leagues should be leaning into. And I'm sure this YouTube deal, part of that, the reason the NFL wanted to do it was to get some of these creators involved.
Yeah, I think YouTube's just uniquely equipped because obviously they are the platform where these people are already putting out content, right? And so the idea that they can tap somebody like iShowSpeed or anybody, it's going to be more natural and in my opinion, probably much more effective than Alex Cooper doing this thing on Peacock that no one pays attention to during the Olympics, right? And she's still huge. It's not like it hurt her to get a paycheck from Peacock and have probably very few people watch that, but it wasn't really seamless and a fundamental part of NBC's plan for how people consume the Olympics. Whereas, I mean, this is the initial statement from YouTube about this deal, and they're already talking about it, which just tells you where their mind is at. And I've talked to people who make like podcast type content on YouTube who have already said that the Sunday Ticket deal and the leagues and the platform's promotion of the NFL, they've seen an explosion of their own numbers just because of that business partnership. And I would imagine that that'll only grow and people's experience on YouTube will feel a little more like NFL centric than it has before. But that's just one part of it. Ben is right to note that the NFL is leading the way on almost all of these fronts because the NFL's media strategy basically is America's media direction in a lot of ways. But let's talk about ESPN because they announced their the nuts and bolts. We still have a lot to learn of their long-awaited standalone streaming service. It is going to be called ESPN, and it is going to cost $30. There's a few different prongs of this, but at the core, I think all three of us have talked almost every time that we've partnered up here that, like, how is ESPN Plus going to factor in? Mm-hmm. And we kind of got some clarity on that part of it. Aside from the fact, okay, if you want this, you're going to pay $30. You can bundle it with Disney Plus and Hulu for $35. Those are all nice to know if you're actually going to be somebody who pays for it. But from our standpoint, how is this going to really like look for people who been using ESPN, and what is their strategy going to be going forward? It's this select plan, which I would say it makes me understand why they're calling the whole thing ESPN a little bit more. They're basically doing away with, it sounds like, the ESPN Plus title entirely, and it's just going to be called the select plan of the subscription. I'm not exactly sure on that, but it's going to stay $12, and it is basically going to be within this app, kind of this smaller parcel where you can go to pay for your UFC pay-per-view or subscribe to NHL Center Ice or some of the things that we had come to associate with ESPN Plus. Does that sound right, Drew?
Yeah, and I think really at the end of the day, it's just like a pretty clunky like thing that they had to do, right? Because they have all these existing deals and partnerships with leagues, like you mentioned, UFC, NHL, like PGA Tour Live. There's any number of properties that are exclusive to ESPN Plus that, it's difficult if that platform does not actually exist in some form or fashion for them to actually fulfill their contractual obligations, right? I think if I had to guess, this is something that over time is going to be phased out and just hopefully kind of create a more seamless experience, but it was kind of a reality of what they had to do to get this thing launched by this fall.
Yeah, you can definitely we can probably pre-write the ESPN Plus is going away story. Like, probably save that one in drafts for like next fall.
So does that mean that would they ask for more from UFC then? Because like that's a pretty fundamental part of how their strategy around UFC has worked. I mean, obviously the pay-per-view, or are those going to be more money? Maybe that's one way that they could do it. I mean, it's still $12 a month for like 30 million people. That's not insignificant to just say,
Well,
we're just phasing that out and it's going to get sucked up by this new thing.
right. I see your point there, but if their ultimate goal is to get you to subscribe in one way or the other to the ESPN flagship app, I don't think it's super relevant how many people are subscribed to your $12 a month tier that only has, a few different things. So their goal is to either, they want you to subscribe directly, they want you to subscribe via a YouTube TV or a traditional pay TV service. They want you to bundle it with, Disney and Hulu. Any of those options, I think, for ESPN is a more attractive option, a more valuable consumer for them than someone who is just, getting ESPN Plus as part of the select plan. And I think when you look at some of the deals that they've struck with distributors, right? Like if you look at the deals that they've struck with some distributors, I believe ESPN Plus is like included. Like if you get DirecTV Stream, which is like, I think $60 a month. It's one of those, it's kind of sports, or the My Sports bundle on DirecTV Stream. I know this is like super in the weeds.
It's so easy to keep track of, right? Everybody's having such an easy time with this.
I've never been more confused about this, by the way. Like I've never been more confused.
ESPN Plus is like already included in a lot of these packages, right? So like, right. I think that's just like an add-in that, yeah.
Well, the reason I started here, hold on. The reason I started here is because I think the number one thing, my best friend has had ESPN Plus for a while, and I believe he probably canceled it at some point because I would get texts from him regularly, especially once I started working here, where he's like, there's another fucking thing on ESPN I can't watch. Mm-hmm. I thought I was paying to watch the things on ESPN, and I think that frustration is, over time, I agree, Drew, like it will go away. And it's obvious, like, people have been saying for years that ESPN should create a platform like this. They're late to the ball game. I think we all know that. But it makes me think they probably just regret doing ESPN Plus at all. Because I don't really know what they gained, and if their eventual strategy was basically just to port all those, suck all those people up into this thing, it was just like 5 years of an experiment that's almost going to be like it never happened at this point, Ben.
Yeah, it feels like maybe ESPN Plus was like a hedge. Like it was like, all right, we'll dip our toes in the streaming water and we'll have a streaming presence, but we're not ready to go all in. And now, like, this is where I'm confused about all this is the name ESPN for the streaming service. So when they announced the name, like my initial reaction was like, haha, that's dumb. Like, why would you call it the same thing that you're already calling yourselves? And then it gets explained to me that no, this is just another way to subscribe to ESPN. So it actually makes sense to call it ESPN. But now we're talking about like, okay, but they're going to have the Rich Eisen content on ESPN, the streaming service. So
but not the network, right? Like it's not going to be on TV. Yeah.
So I subscribe to ESPN through Spectrum. Will I get access to ESPN, the streaming service? Like, can I authenticate my subscription? Okay. Yeah. So that makes a little bit more sense. But it's just like, I don't know. Like, so they're just looking for people who want access to ESPN without having to pay for a cable package, right? That's like the theory behind all of this.
But I think that brings us to the other part. And like, Drew, you already mentioned the My Sports bundle on DirecTV. I have in our notes, YouTube TV is $83 a month. $30. I don't know. I understand, but I just think it's kind of the first streaming service where we've had to actually deal with the sticker shock of what these things should cost, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could subscribe, especially the services that started a long time ago where just, inflation was at a different point and like money just was differently valued and everything was less than $10 once upon a time. And that's just changed over time. But like this one is priced properly. And I just think there's a lot of people who are going to think, I've never paid $30 a month for any of these things. This is 3 times, at least double what I've ever paid. And I'm only getting half the sports I want. Like, I don't know a lot of people who are going to do this when these other alternatives, if you really care enough to watch sports, aren't so much more money. And you get all the other stuff, news and flip on a movie and whatever.
I think you're bang on. And, we've even had ESPN executives. I think one of their ad executives, or it was maybe a Disney executive, but before the upfront was kind of tempering expectations, saying, hey, this is a new service. Like, there's not going to be a lot of subscribers right off the bat. And, the reason this is priced the way it is because Disney still wants to protect the cable bundle as much as they can. That's still the golden goose, even though they're, hemorrhaging subscribers year after year. There's still over 60 million people that pay for one of those things. You're not going to come close to that with an ESPN direct to consumer product, even if it was priced at half the price that they're listing it as. I think this is just a play for the future, right? When they talked about flagship in the lead up to this announcement, the things that they highlighted were the customization, the personalization, things like the AI generated sports center, where you're going to have access to, highlights of all of your favorite teams and that type of thing. That's the selling point for this type of service. But I don't think they actually expect, a ton of people to go and pay $30 a month or $35 if you're bundling it with Disney Plus and Hulu right off the bat. I think this is something that they're creating now to be prepared for the future when, pay TV bundles really are a thing of the past. And now you're going to create some new age bundle that includes, ESPN and Fox One and, Max and whatever else has sports, right?
It makes you understand why on the other side, why they did wait so long, right? Because I think they basically were treating it as like, we got to wait until we absolutely have to do this. I could argue that they should have been, a little bit ahead on something like gambling in order to make a product like this probably more catered to a diehard modern sports fan than it is. And like, you can pick nits, but just from a financial standpoint, they weren't propped up by, venture capital money and things like that, the way that a company, if 20 years ago, who just decided, oh, we're going to try sports and we'll make a platform and we'll charge $5 for it because we're not really a real company yet. Like, it's Disney. They can't work exactly the same way. That's why I think you saw Fox hit pause and wait so long, and they're not getting the same amount of flack for waiting, So I guess it all does sort of make sense, but I just think that sticker shock is going to be exactly that, a shock for a lot of people. Okay, so this is more of a question for Drew, but I think it's worth talking about because when you're looking at that sticker shock and you're seeing how Peacock is lagging and putting all of its hopes and dreams on sports, regardless of what they tell us, and then you have, YouTube and some of these other, Prime Video, Netflix, these platforms that can kind of just come over the top and steal everybody's lunch money if they really wanted to. Let's just keep it with sports for the most part, but like, what do you think is the most likely path for some of the bundling that you were just talking about, Drew? Because I think that's inevitable, and I thought it would have happened sooner, but Venue died. We talked about that plenty, and it feels like there's not even a whisper of any of these companies partnering on a real legit bundle outside of like, oh, technically you'll get a little discount if you buy it through this one weird pathway on our website. There's stuff like that, but not really anything where the platforms are kind of merging or anything like that. So does anything seem close or reasonable to you?
I think that's an unanswerable question at this point. I think we expected with the new administration that it would have been a favorable environment for mergers and acquisitions. But we've seen so far with how the FCC has kind of cracked down on some major media companies that there's going to be a little more scrutiny or probably a lot more scrutiny than some people thought. And I think that's kind of kept some of the discussions at a whisper, right? Eventually, you're right. Like, it will happen. And I think, when you look at like why Fox is launching their direct to consumer product, like when you're talking about, why would anyone buy ESPN's, flagship streaming service? That's an even bigger question for like, why the hell would you buy a Fox service that's going to also be priced pretty highly and only include, Fox FS1, Fox News? Like who is that product for? the reality is it's not for anybody right now, right? Like this is for the future where you're, hopefully going to be able to form some partnerships. And I think why the venue thing got shot down is, they got a little ambitious with, announcing, the joint venture between 3 major media companies right off the bat. I think it just looks better optically, maybe to regulators, if everyone has established their own streaming service. You have Fox One, you have ESPN, whatever, and then they come together and bundle up and offer all of those things at one price and perhaps ideally on one platform.
Something a little or just, now they all have their own platforms, but once upon a time, people had speculated that Fox content could be licensed by ESPN for this app. Right. Something like that made sense to me. Maybe it's still possible, but now they all have their own, so it's like I don't know why they would do a deal like that.
Well, that's the whole point, I think, of create. It makes it easier to reach these deals without regulatory scrutiny. You even heard Lachlan Murdoch on the earnings call yesterday, or I guess it would be Monday for people listening to this podcast, saying that Fox would like to partner with other streaming services and license their content. This is not like a pure play streamer. This is something that's going to be available in other bundles, essentially. And I think that's like the whole point.
I guess with the licensing thing, we have seen like Max under David Zaslav has restarted its licensing of stuff to Netflix, for instance. So it's not like if you have your own platform, you can't do deals like that. It's probably not a great look that you're desperate enough financially to have to, but right. Sometimes that's what
if you're Fox and Warner Brothers Discovery, like that's your future, right? The value in your company is the media that you have, the rights that you have. So with Fox, that's obviously NFL, baseball, whatever, and then Warner, they have their movie studio, and obviously they have some sports, not the most prestigious sports at this point, but that's the play now. Like you're not going to be able to sustain yourself off of carriage fees forever, right? So you're going to have
a production
to find
company or a distributor. Right. Probably not everybody's going to be both, right?
Right.
Ben, did you said the other week that you tee up your Paramount Plus subscription this time of year for Champions League? Did you do that this year?
I've been on and off. I haven't been following it as closely as I have in past years, so I don't think I'm active right now.
Okay. Did you know that Paramount Plus has 3 times the amount of subscribers as ESPN Plus?
I did not. Isn't that
insane?
Is that primarily Champions League, or is that Taylor Sheridan shows? Like I
think it's probably the second thing.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. Yeah, I think that they just hit the gold mine with content people actually wanted TV-wise, but sports probably don't hurt, especially the soccer that they put behind the paywall, but it's just crazy to look at this chart, and Paramount Plus is 7th. And if you take away international Asian companies, it's 5th in the rankings behind HBO Max, but ahead of Peacock, ahead of Apple, ahead of ESPN, Hulu. Like it's a pretty big powerhouse. So I just bring that up because that company is held up with its own merger that might kind of loosen some things as well. Once they can make their stance known, what they're going to do. CBS Sports has the tournament, NFL, some pretty big rights that would obviously be appealing if somebody wanted to bundle or license or anything like that. So the dominoes will continue to fall. But I think we said last time we were on with Drew, we said like this is kind of a new, we're kind of to like chapter 2 of whatever this streaming world is going to be. And I feel like it definitely feels that way. 2025 it's starting to make a little more sense and be a little more clear, even if it's still a nightmare.
Yeah, it seems like everybody knows now, like they have to have a streaming service. And so we finally reached that point where like Fox bit the bullet. We have ESPN now coming out with its, and now it's just a matter of, like you guys were saying, how are we going to bundle all of these or what partnerships are going to emerge? The problem is like, cause I was saying here, like trying to like map out like, okay, could I do like an NBA bundle if I put ESPN and Peacock together? Like you're always going to be missing something. You're just never going to get this complete package. And so,
but if they can be cheap enough,
when
they do that, then you can combine them and it's still not so much more than cable, right? Like that, I think that's kind of where it's headed. Like you're not only going to have one, but the total cost just needs to come down.
It's, I mean, even so, like you were saying with ESPN, like who is this for? And I'm kind of at the point where my cable subscription is only for ESPN because like everything else I can access through Peacock or HBO Max or sometimes Paramount Plus when I have it. But like, if I get rid of my Spectrum subscription, then they just jack up my internet prices. So now my internet prices are jacked up because I no longer have the cable bundle, and whatever I gain just going to the ESPN streaming service is lost. So you're still going to be paying out the ass no matter what. It's all going to cost a lot of money, and it's just like it feels hopeless from that standpoint. But real quick,
the cable company's approach is kind of its own thing. They've been smarter than I would have expected in kind of this survival mode of the things that they're doing to not just let the streamers win. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, it's funny too, because like we were talking about ESPN being $30 to start. I remember when YouTube TV was $30 to start, and like that was like ESPN plus everything else. And then now I think I saw it's like $80 now. So it always goes up, and it's going to keep going up. But real quick before we get to our hot mics, Drew, like what is Versant? Like, can you explain to me Versant?
Right.
Versant. Versant. You write about this. I read about it. It's one of those things like RSNs. Like I was listening to The Town with Matthew Bellany, and they were talking about it, and I just had to keep hitting the 15 seconds back button 20 times because like I couldn't comprehend what it is. Like, explain it to me.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. This Versant is the new cable spinoff company that for a while has been referred to as SpinCo of Comcast / NBC Universal's cable assets. So this is going to be essentially the housing company for CNBC, MSNBC, USA, Golf Channel, all of those NBC properties aside from Bravo that, you might get some sports entertainment news out of. It's going to be interesting. Streaming for those channels is going to be a big question mark because, I read that they are planning on having each of their individual brands create, or formulate their own digital strategy. So if you're like a golf channel, that kind of gives you the option, like, do I want to partner with, Paramount Plus or ESPN Plus or Peacock even, which will be, under the NBC umbrella still.
So I would need USA Network because they have SmackDown. So like that's one of the channels. If I was going to cut the cord, I would need that. So like, how will I be able to watch USA Network?
Yeah, I was wondering that, like, because there's some Olympic stuff that goes on those, and USA is going to have WNBA coming up. That's just not going to be on Peacock or like the NBC Sports app or anything anymore.
It will not be on Peacock or the NBA or the NBC Sports app. But if you have like a YouTube TV or any sort of pay TV subscription, nothing's going to change. The distribution deals with these channels all go through, I think, 2027 at least. So at least for the next 2 years, they're going to stay put wherever they are already on your cable provider. The question becomes, what are they going to do about streaming? Because those channels are no longer going to be available on Peacock or the NBC Sports app. So USA or Golf Channel or even like CNBC, who all those channels air sports, and even like E Network during the Olympics like airs like figure skating and like synchronized swimming or whatever. Like,
I'm all these channels now, so I don't need any of that.
That they're all kind of free to do what they want, and there's no clear path forward of what they're going to do. So that'll be one of the big questions for the latter half of the year is like, how are we going to be able to access those cable networks if you're outside of the bundle?
The answer for me is that I will not, and I'll just have to punt on any of that because I don't have a cable subscription. But all right, I think we saw the future. I think we got it all, and we answered every possible question for the rest of 2025. Just like that, we did it. Okay, hot mics, something that caught our attention, we liked, we disliked, maybe we just want to shout out this week. Ben, why don't you go first?
Yeah, we already talked about one. Jordon, who's associated with North Carolina. Now we're going to talk about the more famous Jordon, who's associated with North Carolina, Miss second runner-up Maine, Jordon Hudson, and more specifically, Pablo Torre's episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out, where he did a deep dive magazine-style report on Jordon Hudson, 11 sources who have dealt with her directly. Just like an incredible podcast episode. Like I don't know what I think podcasts are eligible for Golden Globes now. Like I think that like this could win a Golden Globe. Like this was just an incredible podcast episode. Obviously, the big headline to come out of it was that she had been banned from North Carolina's football facilities. But then you listen to the full 50-minute episode and it's like revelation after revelation. Like there are people who think she's planning a reality show. She tried to work her way into another Bill Belichick commercial when he was filming a commercial for Underdog and wanted to use that to hard launch their relationship last summer. There was stuff about her mom's sex shop and what's gone on there. Like just like incredible reporting. I know there was a tweet that went semi-viral, and I know our Matthew Yoder wrote about this, but like I think this could be the future of like this type of journalism where instead of doing the written deep dives or instead of doing the the type of podcast series type episodes, like this was just a 50-minute episode, well sourced, well reported, and then he presented the information to two of his friends and they discussed it, and like it was really entertaining. I'll admit, like Pablo Torre Finds Out has like, it's a show I'll watch the clips of on social media. It has not cracked my podcast rotation. This feels like a seminal moment for that show and like kind of announcing to the world, like this is what we're capable of. And so it will be in my podcast rotation moving forward. But I just thought that was an incredible piece of journalism and very forward thinking as far as the way we consume all this stuff.
It felt like exactly what Pablo made the show for. Like this story is right there at the crossroads of what he was trying to do. Like he's always, his little spin on it has always been that he wants to take important things seriously and dumb things seriously and make light of important things and kind of go backward. And I think it makes sense to do that in a digital type space. I would just say my slight tweak on the theory is I think YouTube is the future of sports journalism, less so than just podcasts. Because podcasts have been around for a minute. Whereas I think like doing it in a way that attracts people on that platform. Like I think June Lee is a good example of this when he kind of started over there. I think people who are trying to experiment with like, how do they show things and be interesting formulaically? I think that could be the future. Drew, what's up? What's yours?
I was originally going to do something kind of wonky about the sports media rights bubble, but I think I'm just going to put that to the side.
You would?
Yeah. Because we've had a lot of those types of conversations already today. So instead, I'm going to talk about a little bit of pop music because, I'm allowed to say anything on this section apparently. Lady Gaga is having a resurgence, and I'm not sure if I've ever seen a pop star, kind of go out of like the cultural zeitgeist for as long as she has, and then come back with such an amazing album in Mayhem. I don't know if you guys saw these videos of her performing to 2 million people in Brazil last week. Like 2 million people went to her concert, and she also headlined Coachella like a week or two before. Every year I name to my friends, I have like a group chat about 20 or 30 of people, college buddies that I'm close with, and I name my song of the summer. And today I named the song of the summer Love Drug off of Lady Gaga's new album Mayhem. So that is my hot mic. That is my big news today. Have you guys listened to the album at all?
I have not. Okay, I'll let you go then.
My wife and I are together fans of hers for a while because like one of her songs was kind of like our little song. We met in high school, so it's been a while.
What song was it?
We saw her Speechless.
Okay.
Which is like second album or something. We saw her though at Dodger Stadium like 2 years ago when she was on the tour for the last album. And that was genuinely, it wasn't the first time we'd seen her, but it was genuinely one of the coolest shows that I've been to. I'll save the story for trying to get out of there afterward for a different podcast, but I did like the new album.
Maybe you're more hip than me, Brendon, because for me, she had dropped off the face of the earth for like the last 8 years or so, and now she's like the biggest pop star out there so far this year. So I commend Lady Gaga.
She's risen enough to be back as Drew's Song of the Summer. I mean, that's a pretty prestigious title. Forget the 2 million people.
Well, to emerge from Joker 2 also with a resurgence, that's pretty incredible in and of itself. My quick Lady Gaga story is like, look, I'm like a 36-year-old white guy who lives in Ohio. Like, I like the kind of music you would expect that I like. Like, it's a lot of Post Malone, a lot of Drake, a lot of just like cliche. I do not have.
Has to be some Kid Cudi in the mix, right? I mean,
oh yeah, Kid Cudi, Cleveland. Kid named Cudi. That was big for me in like 2009. But I do have like this collection of like 10 songs that are just like my 10 favorite songs of all time. And it's a very eclectic mix. And one of them is Lady Gaga's You and I. Like You and I is one of my favorite songs of all time. I jam out to it all the time. There's a lot of Lorde songs on that list too. Big fan of Royals, but like Lady Gaga, You and I. But one time I was in Nashville and on a bachelor party, and every time we went somewhere with live music, I kept trying to request You and I, but I kept calling it This Town for some reason. So you like write in on the note cards, and I'm like tipping them like $5 on Venmo, like, hey, play Lady Gaga, This Town. And I always get a message back like, 2 hours later, hey, I have no idea what song you're talking about. So I like lost $25.
Sounds like there's a beginning of that story that involves some heavy drinking and then maybe got to that part. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I guess I'm the biggest fan of all three of us. I don't know how we got there, but yeah, it's all right. I'll take it. Mine is the NBA draft lottery. I think that the takes have been incredibly stupid, and I don't know why we have to do this every year. I'm not even talking about the conspiracies around Dallas winning it after the Luka trade or anything of that sort. I'm talking about the fact that people forget why the NBA uses a lottery system to do its draft, and that we have to get mad that it incentivizes the wrong things or anything like that. I'm all for reforming the lottery. I think the league messing with it is smart. I think the WNBA style, I think the NHL does something similar where it's multiple years get factored in. I think that's totally understandable because it's more accurate. But I don't think we need to do the NBA to NFL comps. That's my only bone to pick, because we watch the playoffs and we can see how Nikola Jokic can single-handedly win a game. Bad example because he was a second-round pick, but we see that. And then we don't apply the same understanding when we're talking about the draft, where Victor Wembanyama is so able to affect every outcome of every game that he's way more worth tanking for than Cam Ward is. We get this. It's not that complicated. But then something wonky happens on lottery night, and we have to go back to square one with the debate on almost an annual basis, I feel like. And I'm just I'm pleading with sports media to not do that next year.
Yeah, Mike Greenberg went on like a big kick today about being anti-tanking and how the Mavericks winning the lottery was like great because it showed like you shouldn't tank. And like, I get it. Like, yeah, tanking's bad. Tanking sucks. I root for the Browns. They tank like every 5 years. It sucks. But like, if you want to de-incentivize tanking, just give the best teams the number one pick and then see how that works out. See how it works out for your league if you give the Oklahoma City Thunder Cooper Flag. Like, you have to do something.
People who go so far in that direction, it's equally ridiculous. It's like, do you know how mad we would be if the Celtics got Cooper Flag?
Like you have to
be
do
ripping
something.
our hair out.
You have to do something. So like, I don't like, I think the lottery's been like a happy medium. I think the play-in tournament, like, then kind of creates this situation where teams who might otherwise be tanking are more incentivized to go for it, which is what wound up happening with the Mavericks, and they got the best of both worlds. But like, yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, tanking's bad, but like, what's your solution? To just give all the good teams the good players too? Like, you got to do something.
We also like to categorize, like, we overuse the word tanking. Like, with all due respect, I'm not sure the Charlotte Hornets were going to make the playoffs regardless of their approach to the season, right? Like, the Utah Jazz, their average age is like 17 years old on their roster. I don't exactly think they were going to be the 3 seed if they just played their guys a few more games or said the right things in press conferences to dispel the notion that they were tanking. Like, they're bad. Teams are bad. That's just how this works. So, all right, that's it. That'll wrap us up. We're here for you every single Wednesday. Hit follow, subscribe if you haven't already. We're also across social media, X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're at, we're there as well. And, of course, at awfulannouncing.com, where we're covering this stuff minute to minute, all day, every day. Enjoy your week. We'll talk to you next time.